All right. Well, welcome back. This is week 2, video number 3. It's great to have you be a part of the class. I know that the first week was probably pretty daunting and exhausting and a lot of information. The second week is about the same, so be prepared. But I'm trying to keep things practical and fun and kind of focused on the main goal here, which is in week 2 to really define what late modern or postmodern thought looks like. And without, sort of getting into even more abstraction and detail and philosophical analysis, what I've elected to do in this week is to point you toward the next video, video number 4, which is a 4 or 5 minute clip from a performance, improvisational, impromptu was the word I was looking for, improvisational performance by Robin Williams in the studios of the Actors Studio in 2001, in the presence of an audience and James Lipton, who's the head of the Actors Studio back then, and a kind of analysis of Robin Williams' performance as sort of a template for the random, chaotic fracturedness, as humorous as it is, of the postmodern condition. My argument in the essay that this week I'm asking you to read, and by the way, you may want to look at your schedule and have a look at the view and review and read and other reading and do and posting segments, because those are important to identify as stuff that we need to get accomplished this week. You'll notice that week 3 welcome video, which hopefully you just watched, is listed at the top, and then this video, and then a clip from Robin Williams' performance, which I hope you'll both enjoy and be intrigued by. And then I'm asking you to review a PowerPoint analysis of that, which is short but drawn from the essay that I'm also asking you to read that I wrote on human consciousness, lower on week 2 on the page there. And then I'm going to ask you to go through the second slideshow PowerPoint on logic, deductive and non-deductive argumentations, syllogisms, and so on, to finish up chapter 1 of the Love of Wisdom textbook. And then I'm asking you to dig into chapter 2 of that same textbook, which is epistemology. Now, side note but important, recognize that the reading in the textbook is going to advance more quickly than the content in the course. That's by design. First of all, we have a lot of reading to do to get complete. Secondly, all these categories within the textbook are interrelated. They aren't separate. They are more easily organized that way and discussed that way. But for instance, logic and argumentation leads logically to asking how we know what we know and discussing the issues of epistemology. And all of that relates to this business of human consciousness, which I'm talking about with a specific focus on late modern or postmodern thinking process and consciousness. So it all interlinks together. But those are basically your assignments so far, including, as I mentioned a minute ago, reading my essay that I wrote, which is a scholarly essay which you can download from Moodle, on shifts in human consciousness and their effects on communication and education. In this, I'm dissecting this business of human consciousness with a specific goal in mind, and I want to make this perfectly clear at this point in week 2. I believe with all my heart and mind that people bees today, very different than they used to bees yesterday. I'll say that again, but forgive the grammar, right? It's on purpose. People bees today, very different than they used to bees yesterday. That is to say, their beingness, their consciousness has shifted. Now, we're still human beings. And notice what I didn't say. I didn't say that people today think differently than people did yesterday. That is to say, a generation ago, right? people do think very differently in the 21st century in 2019 than they did at the beginning of this century in 2000, or even going further back to the 1990s or the 1980s. People are thinking very differently than they ever have before. That's true. But it's not just intellect we're talking about. We're talking about the entirety of human consciousness. That is, the way we think, the way we feel, the way we perceive, the way we process, the way we communicate, the way we relate, on it goes, right? So that what I'm saying to you is people bees, their beingness is different today than it used to be yesterday, is a radical truth. We are still human beings in the same basic composite as people a generation, 2 generations, 100 years ago, 1,000 years ago, the first century, even further back in Old Testament times. We're all human beings with certain composite characteristics. We have that commonality. No one's become an alien. But we are being in the world very differently. Very, very differently than people of the past, particularly the distant past. It's one of the reasons why reading the Bible can be so challenging for a lot of people, because you're talking about a world and a universe that no longer even remotely exists. I mean, the world of the first century that Jesus walked in is nothing like the world in which we live today. I mean, think about it, guys. This right here, right? This little cell phone right here, that's my grandson. This little cell phone right here, okay, has changed everything. Everything about the way we think and relate. Just this. I mean, let alone a dozen other things, major things, the internet, you know, the shifts and trends of culture. I mean, on things go. People are very different today. They relate differently. They think differently. They express themselves differently. They feel differently. They communicate differently. I mean, half the time we're having 10 conversations at once. Some of them right through here, and some of them face to face, and on it goes. Right? Okay, you get it. We are very different than people used to be, but we are still people. With that shift of consciousness comes a whole lot of considerations that if we're going to think about the way people think today, that is to say, postmodern or late modern thought, we also have to think about the rest, because it's important. All right, in this essay, I go to great lengths to begin the essay with a consideration of Michio Kaku, who's a Japanese theoretical physicist. I'll get it together, trust me. My consciousness is shifting as we talk. He's a theoretical physicist who's very funny and very smart, and he's come up with a current kind of theory of human consciousness. And so I cite his work, and then I move into a consideration of some of the specific things that are causing this shifting in human consciousness, and I detail those on page 10 in a fairly complicated paragraph, where we talk about the different issues, including, it might be page 11, including modernist disequilibration, dissolution, fracture, lonerism and loneliness, pluralism and polysymbolic religiosity, so on and so forth. These are very highly technical terms that describe trends and thought forms and forces at work in the consciousness and in the intellectual life of people that are causing us to shift our viewpoints and everything else in our consciousness that goes with it. I then use, with all due respect, because the man was an incredible genius, very funny guy, someone I grew up with in my lifetime, that when I heard that he had died, I thought I lost a family member. It seemed so personal to me, and I never knew, obviously, Robin Williams. But someone I had a lot of respect for as a human being, as an artist and an entertainer. But in Robin's performance, in his incredible lightning fast sort of shifts of depiction and improvisation and impersonation and other things, that he folded into his performance and kept us just on our seat, riveted with his brilliance and his humor and everything else. He really inadvertently puts on display what I think is really the most creative and brilliant aspects of a late modern consciousness. So much so that I'm suggesting that if we consider his performance and what was behind it and what he depicted in lightning fast, kind of progression, with an analytical set of eyes, like scholars, and we consider all of what went into that performance, actually what he's mirroring is the content of the lives and the issues of his times, the culture of his times. What's incredible about Robin Williams is how much culture he gets in such a short, rapid-fire way, and keeping it all hilariously funny. But I want to say to you that this guy was a culture junkie, and overloading in his own consciousness is the culture and the thought forms of the times in which we live. And so I want to point to that example as a way to really make concrete, I hope, this business of what does a late modern person look like? What does the consciousness look like? What does the thought process look like? Yes, in an exaggerated and extreme way in Robin Williams' performance, but in a very, I think, vivid way, too, that illustrates the forces at work that underlie the ways that people are these days. And again, I hope it's entertaining and funny and keeps it light for you, but there are some serious points to be made in the essay, in the performance, and in its analysis. And again, it pertains to these abstract ways of considering philosophical domain, epistemology. How do we know what we know? How do we glean from our senses this thing called reality? How do we respond to it? In what ways do we engage with reality? On and on it goes. This is all very relevant to the business of what's behind our thought content in the times in which we live. So in a nutshell, this is the goal of week 2, is to really get a clear picture, not the only one, but I think a vivid and funny and entertaining one that will help us to see, okay, this is what late modern consciousness looks like. It doesn't look as complex and as brilliant in every person that we run into today as it does in Robin Williams. He's an epitome, right? He's a performer who's reached a level of execution and comedy that no one else will ever touch, trust me. It's just incredible. But still in all, we can learn through the cultural lenses that he's providing about the thought processes of our times in a very vivid way, very memorable way, I hope. So again, I hope you enjoy all this content. I hope that you'll notice that there's a reading report due on Chapter 2 at the end of the week, and also some posts, which for the first time in the course we're going to do during the week, around answering questions related to the text and to this topic of late modern consciousness in Robin Williams' example. Okay, so that's what it's all about this week. It's a lot to take in, I know, but I hope you enjoy it, and I hope you hang in there and stay with it. It's really important stuff, and I'll see you online.